The lake lay still under a skin of mist, its silver surface broken only by the slow drift of reeds that ticked against each other like small bones. Pines stood in dark ranks around the shore, their breath cool and resinous, carrying the scent of wet bark and earth. Serena waded waist deep in the water, her long white hair floating across the surface before slipping down her back like strands of silk. The day had clung to her skin with grit and smoke, and the cold bite of the lake was the only thing sharp enough to strip it away. She drew her fingers through her hair, combing out tangles, trying to remember what it felt like to be cleaned out. Her garments lay folded neatly on a flat stone near the bank. She kept them in sight. In the outer districts, cruelty came dressed as laughter, and she had learned to expect it. Tonight, she thought perhaps she could outrun it just long enough to wash herself in peace. But the rustle of dirt under hurried steps betrayed her hope. A low chuckle carried across the water. She turned her head and caught movement in the trees. Then a hand darted from the shadows, snatched her clothes in one swift grab, and bolted. Another figure burst into the open, boots drumming mud, shouting encouragement between cackles. Her throat tightened. Heat rose into her face even as the cold water pressed against her chest. She sank deeper, hugging herself, the wet wrap clinging transparent against golden skin. One boy held the garments high, grinning as he waved a cheap recorder in his other hand, its red light blinking like a cruel eye. The other tossed her sash in the air as if it were a prize. Their laughter knifed through the quiet, bouncing against the trees that only stood and watched. Serena tried to call out, but the sound caught in her chest. Pride held her tongue as tightly as shame. She would not beg, not for them, not for anyone. Her pulse thudded in her ears, louder than the reeds, louder than the faint wings of an owl overhead. Alone, always alone when they chose her for sport. You finished. The voice came from the path. Low, even. Not mocking. Not rushed. She froze, turning slowly toward the sound. A tall man stood just beyond the reeds, a field lamp clipped to his belt, its circle of light cutting a path across roots and bark. A survey bag hung from his shoulder, straps worn and stained with years of use. He unbuttoned a long coat, shrugged it free, and dropped it on the grass without looking at her. His head remained turned, gaze fixed toward the trees. "Take it," he said. She clutched her arms tighter, breath shallow, uncertain whether to trust this stranger. "You didn't see anything," she managed, her voice raw. "I saw enough." His tone didn't shift. He stepped forward a half pace, his stance angled, a wall between her and the open trail. His eyes scanned the dark, as if she were already covered, already safe. The coat steamed faintly in the night air, heavy and waiting. Mist curled around its edges, dark fabric absorbing the silver glow. Serena's chest clenched. She could stand in the lake all night, but the cold would claim her before pride could save her. He didn't move closer, didn't press. He only stood like a guard who had always been there, as if the laughter of boys was beneath his notice. Something cracked inside her, some fragile line between fear and relief. She stepped forward, the water sliding from her body in shivering lines. The wrap clung to her, turned scandalous by the lake's touch. Still, he did not turn his face. His eyes stayed on the ridge, cataloging trees, giving her time. She reached the bank and seized the coat, wrapping it close. The fabric smelled of resin, metal, and old rain, warmth bleeding quickly into her skin. Her voice came small but steady. "Thank you." Only then did he glance back, just enough to confirm she was covered. His gaze met hers with calm weight, no pity, no leer. "You're safe," he said. And for the first time that night, she almost believed it. The path from the lake wound narrow between pines, their roots pushing up through the dirt like old bones. Serena padded barefoot along it, the coat heavy around her shoulders, brushing the ground with each step. Cold earth bit at her solace, but Darren shortened his stride without comment, his lamp casting a steady circle ahead. The laughter of the boys had faded into the dark, but it clung in her ears like smoke. She pulled the coat tighter, pressing her arms across her chest as though holding the last of her dignity in place. "You could have chased them," she said at last, her voice brittle, carried on the damp air. "I could have," Darren replied. He didn't look at her, eyes fixed on the shifting shadows. "Why didn't you?" "They want to be chased. Noise feeds them. They record because they want to show." He lifted the lamp, dimming its glare with a tilt. "Silence ruins their stage." His certainty made her stumble for half a breath. She had expected excuses or bravado. Instead, he spoke as if he'd spent years dismantling cruelty without lifting more than his voice. She studied his face in profile, the hard line of his jaw, the scar near his brow, the calm way he carried himself. He did not seem proud of what he'd said. It was simply the truth, and it disarmed her more than any defense could have. The path narrowed again, crossing a wooden plank bridge that creaked under their weight. Black water slid beneath, whispering against the supports. Serena's reflection wavered in the current, pale hair trailing like smoke. The coat's hem brushed the boards, picking up moisture until it shone faintly in the lamplight. Her lips pressed thin. "They do this to anyone alone. Most nights I planned for it. Tonight, I wanted to feel clean." He nodded once, no sympathy in the gesture, only acknowledgement. Approval, perhaps, for admitting it aloud. A rustle came from the brush ahead. Darren stopped instantly, one hand lifted in a small signal for her to wait. Serena's breath caught. The lamp's beam swung, slicing across the undergrowth. A boy stepped from the shadows, recorder lifted high, smug smile curling his lips. He angled for another clip, emboldened by the night. Serena's throat closed again, shame prickling her skin. Darren didn't reach for the device. Instead, he swept the beam higher, catching two dull badges nailed to a trunk, half hidden under moss. Park monitor tags. Her father's station emblems, stolen for play. Darren's voice stayed even. "Wearing badges you weren't cleared to touch. Bold." The boy's smirk faltered. His grip on the recorder loosened by a hair. "You'll return what you took," Darren continued. "And you'll erase her from your memory card. If I see a single frame of her anywhere, I file a note to your father. Time, place, badge numbers. You don't scare me," the boy snapped. But his shoulders sagged under the weight of the words. "I don't aim to scare you," Darren said, tone still level. "I aim to be believed." Silence settled for 3 slow counts. Serena's fury burned hot in her chest, steadying her spine. She met the boy's eyes, unflinching. He was the one who broke first. With a muttered curse, he tossed a bundled shape to the path her garments, wet and streaked with leaves, then turned and fled into the dark. Darren nudged the bundle toward her with the side of his boot, saying nothing, then resumed walking as if the matter were already closed. Serena stared after the boy, then down at the clothes, then at Darren's back. No lecture. No display. Just simple authority that cut sharper than force. She gathered the bundle and hurried to catch up, the coat swinging around her knees. After 20 steps, she finally said, "That was neat." "I prefer efficient," Darren replied. "What's your name?" She asked. "Darren Salas's." "Serena," she answered, lifting her chin despite the cold. He nodded, a small motion, but it felt like he was tucking her name somewhere he would not forget. They climbed on, the path growing steeper, the night closing around them, and for the first time since the lake, she felt less like prey and more like a person walking, beside someone who meant to keep her safe. Pines thickened as they climbed, blotting out pieces of sky until only scraps of silver moonlight broke through. The slope tugged heat back into Serena's legs, though her toes still numbed against the dirt. The coat dragged heavier with every step, its folds clinging damp from the bridge. She gripped it tighter, breathing in resin and metal, the lingering ghost of rain in the fabric. Beside her, Darren moved with the steady rhythm of someone who knew the trail by heart boots, striking roots without falter, lamp beams shifting just enough to light her way without blinding her. She risked a sideways glance. His profile was cut sharp against the glow-strong nose, stubble rough but trimmed, eyes that scanned and settled without rest. His hands swung loose, marked by work rather than vanity. Everything about him suggested control, yet nothing about it felt rehearsed. He carried silence like a weight he had long since learned not to put down. "You didn't chase them," she said again, testing him. "I don't give boys what they want," he replied. "And what do they want?" "Noise. Proof they got under your skin. The louder you answer, the longer their game lasts." She frowned, breath puffing white into the cold. "You sound certain. I've been the quiet in somebody else's noise for a long time." They crested a narrow rise, where the path broke into stone steps carved by older hands. The lamp showed scratches on rock, scuffs where feet had passed for years. Serena slowed, watching her own shadow stretch ahead of her like another self thin, fragile, but climbing anyway. "I live in the Basin Quarter," she said suddenly, surprising herself. "Too many eyes. Too much noise. The lake. It's the only place that feels untouched." Darren didn't answer right away. He adjusted the lamp, swept the beam across the pines, and said, "Until they followed." The words carried no pity, just recognition. It steadied her more than comfort would have. A gust threaded through the trees, sharp and cold. The coat flared open at her hip, slicing her skin with icy fingers. She bit back a shiver. Darren noticed, stepped subtly closer, his frame cutting off the wind without remark. The gesture felt practical, not tender, and somehow that made it more tender than anything else. She studied him as they walked. "You have rules," she said. "They keep me decent." "What rules?" He gave a half-shrug. "Don't take more than you're given. Don't waste words that won't help. Don't fly drones at night. People deserve a dark that belongs to them." The simplicity of it disarmed her. A man with rules she could see, not pretenses she had to guess. They reached a break in the trees. The slope leveled into open ground, and there on the cliff's edge crouched his home. Dark panels angled against the wind, one tall window gleaming faintly like an unblinking eye. The structure looked clean, deliberate, as though no piece of it tolerated waste. Serena paused, catching her breath. The sight of a roof, a door, warmth waiting beyond, it tugged at something inside her chest she hadn't realized was hollow. Darren keyed the door, then stepped aside, hand braced against the frame. Warm air rolled out, carrying a faint bitter trace of coffee and the hum of a heater. He did not usher her in, did not press. He only waited, head tilted slightly, as though the threshold was hers alone to cross. Her knees felt light from the sudden shift between cold and heat. She hesitated, eyes darting between the dark forest behind and the square of light ahead. Then she stepped past him, into the warmth the door sealed with a soft sigh, and the sound carried a finality that startled her. It was the first door in months to close behind her, without fear trailing through the crack. Warmth wrapped the small, home in layers heater hum low, faint crackle of resin from some hidden stove, and the sharp bitter note of coffee that clung to wood and fabric. Serena stood near the threshold, coat clutched around her like armor, watching Darren move. He hung his survey bag on a peg, set his lamp aside, and adjusted the heater 2 clicks higher. Every motion was efficient, deliberate, as if living alone had drilled waste out of him. He took a towel from a shelf and laid it neatly across a chair. Bathrooms left. Water runs hot. His tone carried no edge of invitation, just plain direction. Serena's throat tightened. She had expected questions, prying curiosity, or worse, the leering kind of silence that forced her to fill it with excuses. Instead, he left space for her choice. She stepped slowly down the short hall, the coat heavy at her shoulders. The bathroom door opened to a compact room lined in pale stone, pipes humming faintly in the walls. She hesitated at threshold. "Keep talking," she called, her voice sharper than she intended. "I don't like closed rooms." He didn't miss a beat. She heard him cross to the small kitchen, the metallic clink of a kettle set on the stove. "What about the lake?" he asked, raising his voice just enough. "Cold," she answered, fingers fumbling with the coat's buttons. "Did it help?" She peeled the damp wrap from her skin, letting it fall to the counter, mud streaks still clinging to the hem. Steam began to rise as the spray bar hissed to life. "It made me honest," she said finally. "I kept telling myself I wouldn't need help." She stepped under the water. Heat slid down her scalp, through her hair, over the line of her spine. "And?" "I needed help." The kettle clicked, and she imagined his face weighing the easy replies before discarding them. Then his voice came, steadier than the water rushing over her. "Needing help isn't the same as being helpless." Her chest ached. She closed her eyes and let the grit swirl from her skin down the drain. Steam fogged the mirror until her outline vanished. For the first time since the boys had laughed from the trees, she didn't feel their eyes on her dot when she shut off the spray. The room hung thick with mist. She wrapped the towel tight and cracked the door just wide enough to see him. He had set a folded shirt and soft pants on the chair, his hand resting there for a moment before he drew it back. "Wear these," he said, already turning to the stove. "I'll heat soup." She studied his back as he moved, a man who made space for dignity as if it were part of his trade. Dressing quickly, she stepped out in the oversized shirt and loose pants, damp hair trailing water down her collarbone. Darren glanced once, confirming the fabric covered what it should, then returned his eyes to the pot simmering on the stove. The scent of virenroot rose with steam, mingled with the earthy bite of Draxon mushrooms. He warmed flatbread on a pan, the hiss of oil quick and sharp. Serena sank into a chair. Wrapping her hands around the cup of tea, he slid across the table. Its earthy heat steadied her grip. "You could have asked what I owe you," she said. "I didn't do it for a ledger." She lifted the cup, hiding her mouth in the steam. "Then why?" He stirred the pot once, flame reflecting in his eyes. "Because no one else did." The honesty landed hard. No joke, no flirtation, no edge of debt. Only fact. The warmth of the tea slid through her chest, loosening something knotted there. She set the cup down, met his gaze across the table, and for the first time allowed herself to believe she might be safe. If only for tonight. Dawn broke pale across the ridge, a thin stripe of gold prying through the mist. Serena pulled Darren's coat tighter around her shoulders as they stepped outside, the sleeves brushing her wrists like a weight both foreign and grounding. The air bit sharp, pine-scented and damp, but it was cleaner than the Basin Quarter had ever felt. Each breath she drew seemed to scrape the remnants of yesterday's shame a little further from her ribs. The trail bent upward, stones and roots twisted together, the ground slick from the night's rain. Darren led without haste, boots sure on the incline. Every so often he slowed a half step, letting her catch pace without making the gesture obvious. His silence was not cold. It walked beside her like a wall. She could lean against Dot at one point. The path narrowed to a ledge, the earth falling away in a sudden drop where fog smothered the valley floor. Serena froze, staring down into the blur of stone and dark treetops far below. Her stomach clenched. She didn't notice Darren's hand until it brushed lightly against hers, Not grabbing, not pulling, just there, steady, close enough to catch if she faltered. She glanced sideways. His eyes stayed on the trail, unreadable, his jaw tight with focus. The touch was a precaution, nothing more. Yet her pulse jumped like it had caught fire. "You don't speak much," she said, her voice a thin attempt to scatter the tension. "Words aren't always useful. And when they are, then they should matter." A short, soft laugh slipped from her before she could stop it. "Is that how you scared those boys off?" Fewer words, heavier weight. "They wanted a scene," he replied. "I gave them nothing to sell." Her smile dimmed, replaced by thought. "What if they come back?" "They won't. They'll avoid me now." The certainty in his tone landed heavier than stone. Serena studied him, his steady stride, the way he carried his silence like another tool on his belt. It wasn't arrogance. It was a man who had already made peace with the cost of his words. The path leveled, widening into a field of tall grass, bending under dew. Sunlight broke through, gilding each blade until the world shimmered silver and gold. Serena slowed, tipping her face toward the warmth. The coat slipped off one shoulder. She didn't fix it, he noticed. She felt it in the subtle change of his stride, the brief pause of his breath. He looked, but only long enough for her to feel the weight of his gaze, then returned his eyes forward. That restraint always tightened something in her chest. "You keep looking away," she murmured, "when you don't want to." His eyes cut briefly to hers. "And if I didn't?" She swallowed, heat rising against the chill air. "Then maybe I'd stop hiding behind your coat." The words hung between them, heavier than the mist. Darren's silence shifted, sharper now, as if he held something back with effort. They reached a fallen tree stretched across the trail. He climbed easily, then turned, hand extended. Serena hesitated, then placed hers in his. His palm was warm, calloused, steady. He pulled her up with ease, but didn't let go right away. Their eyes met in the pause, breath mixing in the cold. She withdrew first, clutching the coat tighter though it had already fallen open. Her heart thudded hard against her ribs. "You said last night you don't fix people," she murmured. "So what are you doing with me now?" Darren stopped walking. The mist curled around them, the valley yawning below. When he spoke, his voice was low, firm, absolute. "Keeping you from falling. The rest is yours to decide." The words struck deeper than any hand on her skin. Serena turned away, blinking fast, hiding her face in the veil of morning light. Yet when they resumed walking, her steps fell closer to his than before, as if the choice had already been made. Rain had started again by the time they returned, a fine mist that hardened into drops, ticking against the panels of Darren's cliffside home. The ridge trailed away into shadow behind them, the lake just a dim silver cut in the distance. Serena stepped inside first, damp hair clinging to her face, the oversized shirt and borrowed pants sticking to her skin. Darren followed, closing the door with its soft mechanical sigh. The sound felt like a seal against the world outside. He moved with his usual precision coat to the hook, survey bag to the counter, lamp unclipped and set aside. Nothing wasted, nothing hurried. Yet the silence between them no longer felt like the empty quiet of strangers. It pulsed, carrying a weight that neither of them named. Serena lingered near the table, pulling the coat tighter, even as heat from the heater softened the chill. She felt the scrape of his gaze on her, brief, controlled, but longer than before. He turned to the stove, struck the burner, and set a pan across it. Oil hissed as he cut dried Draxon mushrooms, his knife steady against the board, her arms folded, not for cold, but to anchor herself. "Do you ever let anyone else in here?" She asked. No. He dropped the mushrooms into the pan. "Not since I built it. Too many people bring noise with them." "And me?" His hand paused over the spoon. He looked up, eyes steady. You brought silence. I don't mind silence. Her throat tightened. She sat slowly, wood creaking under her weight. The pan hissed, steam curling into the air, scent earthy and sharp. You said last night you were curious. I am. He stirred once, stepped back. But I don't take without asking. The restraint in his voice struck harder than hunger ever could. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. And if I asked? For a moment he didn't move. The heater hummed, the rain tapped steady. The pan filled the room with its sizzle. Then Darren crossed the floor in 3 deliberate steps. His shadow fell over her. He braced one hand on the table beside her, the other rising to brush a strand of white hair from her face. Then I'd stop pretending I don't want you, he said, voice rougher now, stripped of its careful edge. Her breath caught. She tilted her head up, amber eyes locking to his. For the first time, he didn't look away. His gaze traced her mouth, the bare slope of her shoulder where the shirt had fallen, the damp line of hair sticking to golden skin. His self-control frayed in the open. You've been holding back since the lake, she whispered. Yes. Her fingers lifted, brushing the scar on his knuckle, sliding up his wrist, over the solid muscle of his arm. Darren. Stop holding back for one heartbeat. He didn't move at first, jaw tight as if pulling against a leash. Then he leaned down, thumb trailing her jaw. His mouth hovered a fraction from hers, his breath warm. You tell me to stop, I stop. I won't. The silence broke. His lips pressed to hers, slow at first, careful, but when she leaned in, the restraint cracked. The kiss deepened, urgent, his hand sliding behind her neck, pulling her closer. She clutched his shirt, knuckles white, rising from the chair into his chest. The oversized shirt slipped further down her shoulder. His fingers traced the curve of bare skin, reverent, not rushed. She gasped softly, and he swallowed the sound with another kiss. The pan hissed louder, edges of mushrooms charring, but neither of them turned. The world had shrunk to the heat between them, to breath and touch, and the danger of how easily discipline could turn into hunger. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, breath ragged. His voice came low, rough. This isn't about saving you. I know, she whispered, lips brushing his. It's about wanting me. He kissed her again, slower this time, sealing the words. Behind them, smoke curled from the stove, sharp and bitter, but neither cared. Not yet. Morning crept in soft, pale and steady, seeping through the tall window of Darren's home. The storm had broken in the night, leaving the air washed clean, the pines outside glittering with beads of water. Serena stirred against the sheets, warm in a way she hadn't known for years. Darren's arm lay draped across her waist, his chest a quiet wall against her back. She lay still for a moment, eyes closed, listening to the even rhythm of his breathing. For once, she didn't wake braced for footsteps in the dark. She shifted slightly, hair tumbling over her shoulder, and found his eyes already open. They were calm, steady, but softer than the night before. He didn't speak right away, only brushed a strand of white from her cheek, tucking it gently behind her ear. You don't sleep heavy, she murmured, voice rough from both sleep and the weight of the night. Too many years, listening for trouble. His thumb lingered at her jaw. But not here. Her throat tightened. Do you regret it? No. He held her gaze without hesitation. Do you? She shook her head quickly, almost fiercely. I thought I'd wake up and feel like a mistake. I don't. I feel. She hesitated, searching for words she hadn't used in too long. I feel alive. He kissed her then, slow and deep, sealing the confession into something neither of them could take back. When he pulled away, his voice was low but firm. Then that's enough. Later, when the smell of porridge and crisp bread filled the kitchen, She sat wrapped again in his shirt, bare legs brushing the floor, hair catching the sunlight through the window. Darren moved with his same quiet precision, slicing dried root, pouring strong frozen sea coffee. But now, every so often, his eyes lingered on her reflection in the glass longer than he meant to. She pretended not to notice, though heat rose in her cheeks with every glance. Over breakfast, she tried for sharpness. "You didn't ask what I was doing before the lake. You'll tell me if you want to," he said, tearing the bread in half and sliding a piece onto her side of the table. "I worked the Basin District kitchens," she admitted, fingers brushing the crust, but not eating yet. "Scraps for us, stock for the overseers. They said I should be grateful. Every night I went back to a corner that stank of mold. The lake was supposed to wash that away. Did it? No, not until you came." He didn't flinch, didn't soften. He stirred his coffee, then set the spoon aside. "I don't fix what's broken in people. I keep them warm until they find the strength themselves." The honesty landed harder than any comfort could. She searched his face, found no hint of doubt. "You talk like you've done this before." His eyes didn't move from hers. "Not like this." The air shifted, thick with things unsaid. She wrapped both hands around her cup, letting the steam hide her expression dock. When breakfast ended, Darren led her to the wall, where his maps were pinned red threads marking water rights, ironwood growth, shifts in land. She traced the lines, then looked back at him. "And where do I fit?" He stepped behind her, hands resting at her waist, chin brushing her shoulder. "You're not a mark on the map. You're the reason I keep making them." Her breath caught. Words failed. Instead, she covered his hands with hers, grounding herself in the solid weight of them. By midday, the mist had burned away, the valley opening wide beneath the cliff. The lake glimmered faintly, no longer the place of her shame, but a silver stripe folded into the view. She leaned against Darren's shoulder, watching sunlight break over the pines. "Do you still want me to stay?" she asked quietly. He turned his head, kissed the crown of her hair once steady. "I want you here as long as you choose it." Her eyes closed, chest easing. For the first time in years, she felt no weight pressing her down, only choice, only warmth. Behind them, his home stood solid against the ridge. Before them, the valley stretched wide, waiting. The laughter of boys at the lake had been carried off into nothing. What remained was this: a quiet man who spoke little, a woman who refused to be humiliated again, and a bond forged not in rescue, but in choice. And as the light grew stronger, Serena knew she had chosen to stay.